Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. If you enjoy my video today, please subscribe, and if you click on the bell next to the subscribe button, you'll be notified each time I post a new video. Today's video is a flip through my art journal. I've deconstructed the journal to make it easier to work on individual pages. This is a Finnabar journal and I created the cover in a class with Anna when she was here in Adelaide. As you can see, it is her typical style with lots of metals and colour. This page has a layer of Tim Holtz printed tissues as the base, and then some texture paste through a stencil and some background stamping before the colour was applied using colour crush powders and water. The flowers are a free digital printout that I have coloured using watercolour pencils. The shading was done using my Faber-Castell big brush markers, and a permanent fine line pen was used for the detailing. The background on this page was created using plain tissue paper that I attached with gel medium, being sure to crinkle it up as much as I possibly could to get lots of texture. Once again, I've used texture paste and a stencil to add texture to the background. The colour on the background is a combination of 3 or 4 glimmer mist sprays. Once this was dry, I again used a stencil and some texture paste to put the flowers on the page. These were allowed to dry, and then I coloured them with acrylic paint. Shading was done with my big brush markers and detailing with a fine line permanent marker. The title was stamped on using Stays On ink and individual alpha stamps. This page is very textured. The flower itself has a lot of depth, but the background also has metal and cotton added to it. The background has a combination of texture paste, metal star-shaped items, cotton thread, stamping and colour crush powders for the colour. The flower is made by cutting thin slivers of paper in a rough triangular shape from scrapbooking paper and attaching them using gel medium, building up the layers. The centre of the flowers are also scrapbooking paper, and a hand-doodled border finishes the page off. The background on this page is a mixture of acrylic paints. The stitch circles have been stamped using Stays On ink, and once again texture paste through a stencil was added for added texture. The twine has been wrapped around the page numerous times and secured with staple. The chipboard frame has been painted with acrylic paints, and the title is stickers from my local scrapbooking store. The butterfly is a stamp that I cut out using my scan and cut when I was learning to use it. There is some random stamping on the background of the frame. I have punched around the edges randomly before going around them with black ink to form a border. Another page with a similar background. In this background though, I have added burlap flowers. The background colour is acrylic paints, and once again it has texture paste. I've drawn some circles using a stencil and coloured some of those circles in with white acrylic paint. The stencil I use is a chicken wire stencil, and the chicken wire is risen, and you can see I've added some Inca gold here and there on the background just to give it a bit of a sparkle. The leaves have been cut out of scrapbooking paper, and they've been attached to the layout with dimensions so that they are not sitting flat. The centres of the flowers are glass beads, and there you can see a close-up of the burlap flowers that are in the background. They were stuck down using gel medium and just coloured with the same materials as the background. The flower itself was made out of scrapbooking paper, which I just stamped on with some red ink, cut them out with using a die, and then did some detailing on them with a white gel pen and a black gel pen. Around the border I have used a Stickles, which is a dimensional paint, and just put a broken white line around it adding a bit more texture to the background. I have covered the background of this page with tags from clothing. Texture paste through a stencil was added next. Some background stamping followed with an assortment of stamps before a good spray with some spray inks. Shading to the outlines of the tags was done with the Faber-Castell big brush markers, and some Inca gold was rubbed randomly over the page. The wooden Christmas decorations were painted with twinkling H2Os before some light stamping with StazOn ink. The ribbons and the ornaments were attached with gel medium. The title was die cut from 2 different papers and attached so they were slightly offset. They were then given a coat of dimensional magic. I have then used a white gel pen to draw a doodled border around the page and white spots over the background. The background on this page started off with some glass beads mixed with some gel medium and put through a stencil. To colour the page, I used some Artiste spritzing ink and some random stamping using StazOn ink in black. The flowers and leaves were drawn on some book paper and coloured with twinkling H2Os. I then layered them onto some white cardstock because when I stuck them straight onto the background they just faded away. You couldn't see them at all. The designs on the flowers were created using an assortment of permanent markers and scribbles, which are a dimensional paint that comes in a squeeze bottle. All of the shading is done with my Faber-Castell big brush markers, and the black detailing and doodling was done with a permanent fine tip marker. Tim Holt's word stickers made up the title. The background on this page is very textured. It's covered with clothes pegs that have been separated. Some of the wire joining pieces have also been used. The background colour is an assortment of ink sprays and glimmer mists. I have used a water spray bottle to help move the colour around and get it down into the crevices. I saw this technique on a video by Maramie Small Arts and just had to give it a try. To decorate this page I used some lace motifs my mother had given me and some metal flowers and a metal butterfly. The lace was attached using gel medium and the metals were attached using my hot glue gun. I also put some dots of hot glue randomly over the background. I gave the metals a coat of gesso and then sprayed the whole arrangement with yellow ink spray. I dry brushed some gesso on the hot glue daubs on the background to make them stand out more. I also added some small dots of Pearl Pink Pearl Pen by Viva to the background. The title was printed on my printer in a colour to match the page. I did go around the edge of the page with a black ink pad to give it a darker border. This page was created because I saw a stamp very similar to this and loved it. I tried to buy the stamp but could not find it anywhere, so I decided I could draw them. I mean, how hard can it be? They are just circles. I started with the background using a couple of yellow acrylic paints. Then of course my go-to texture paste and stencils. I did colour the texture paste with some acrylic paint. A bit of stamping with an orange archival ink and some black circles using the lid in some paint finished the background off. I drew the flowers and then coloured them with acrylic paints, shading with my Faber-Castell big brush markers and detailing using a black fine liner, permanent marker and a white gel pen. The title was created using individual alpha stamps and some black StazOn ink. This page is one of those reverse type pages where you create an all over colourful background, then cover all of the background except for your design. The background was created using distress inks. I covered the whole page using 4 coloured inks with my blending tool. I then added texture paste through a stencil all over the page. Then I stamped randomly over the page using StazOn ink. I then drew the flowers on the page with a black thickish permanent marker and painted the background with black acrylic paint. When that was dry, I rubbed a fairly heavy layer of Viva Inca Gold over the black paint to give it a nice burnished texture. The detailing on the flowers was done with a permanent fine line marker. The title is a sticker from a Tim Holtz Small Talk sticker book. This is another page that was inspired by a stamp. I just love the Dina Wakley Scribbly Bird stamp and wanted to use it on an art journal page. I cannot remember what I used to colour the background on this page. I actually think I did it in a class with a different teacher maybe 3 years ago, so I haven't got a hope of remembering what it is. But it has a couple of doilies in it, some circles made with gesso and a bottle cap, and some stamped butterflies. To make the tree, I mixed some brown acrylic paint with some modelling paste and applied it to the page using my palette knife, being careful to put lots of grooves and texture into the paste to emulate the bark on a tree. Once this was dry, I used several different coloured paints to dry brush over the texture to give it some detail. The birds were stamped onto some watercolour paper and coloured using pearlescent watercolours. I cut them out and attached them to the tree branch. I then shaded the birds and tree with my big brush markers and added detail with a black fine line pen and white gel pen. I also used the same pens to draw the check border around the page. The title was printed on my printer and coloured to blend into the page. This double page layout has a few learning opportunities on it. I used glimmer sprays on the background, then I stamped the row of flowers along the bottom of the page. Next came the circles, and then I covered them with white acrylic paint. It was at this stage that I decided to give the background a coat of gel medium to make it waterproof. Big mistake. The sprays in the background were not waterproof and ran all over the place. I decided to continue on and ended up with that very streaky look all over the background. I then stamped some butterflies with black ink and some doilies and circles with gold ink onto the background. I used some acrylic markers to colour the flowers along the bottom and shaded around the circles with my big brush markers. I used a die to cut the butterflies from some pattern paper and stuck them to the page with gel medium, being very careful this time. I coloured the butterfly bodies with acrylic paint, then gave them a coat of dimensional magic. I added a bit more gold to the page by rubbing Viva Inca Gold here and there, and also in a rough border around the page. I used some black acrylic paint to put an uneven border around the page, then used some white acrylic paint to put some dashes in that border. Some detailing of the flowers with a permanent fine line marker and a computer printed verse finished the page off. I hope you enjoyed my video today. Don't forget to subscribe so you can see my new videos as they become available.